everyone who's joining us remotely. Thanks for joining the DataSplice user group focused on oil and gas. So, Graham, whenever you're ready, you can take it away.
Thanks, everybody, for coming. This is a user group meeting. It's for the users and for us to get feedback. At the same time, we welcome those of you that are in the room just to come and see what DataSplice is all about. We are not going to try and sell to you. This is not a sales presentation. It's all about users. Put it there as well. So there's the paper form. And if we just go to the next slide, we want to get rid of paper because of this. I mean, this is just so nice. I love that kind of scenery, but we're losing it. And then there's also this aspect as well. Those of you that are in oil and gas and pipeline, those DOT inspections can be pages long. Most of that information doesn't actually need to be in Maximo. It doesn't help the maintenance process. It's things you've got to do, steps you've got to take. But if you create your inspection all in Maximo, even if it's as simple as job plan steps, it's all got to be built in Maximo. But there's going to be some pieces that need to go out there. You're doing something as a pressure differential check that you've got to do. Well, that might need to go into Maximo. The rest of it doesn't. Easy audits and reporting. I started working with Tim at NASA with reporting, and he showed me where their auditors go. If you're lucky, that's your audit trail. Auditors come, you need to find something, you go find it. Typically, the example that Tim gave me when they were doing some of their inspections years ago, it's all in filing cabinets. So we want to just make it electronic. With the DataSplice inspection form, it stores it all in the DataSplice database. It sends out reports various places. It also writes to Maximo where it needs to, but at the same time, it can also write to other systems, all happening at the same time simultaneously, so the reporting is really easy. And then one thing we've looked at, we did for one customer, they had their inspection form maybe 20 questions long. The DOT element of that was only 5 questions in the middle, so when the auditors come in and run their report, they just see those 5. They don't need to see all the things that the organization added. And then the other side is conditional. It's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but this is typical sort of questionnaire you might fill in. I got the idea for these things when I did my passport application, where if you answer this, go to section 4. If you're married, go to here. If you do this, you go to that, and it's that sort of flow. All those questions have to be presented if it's on a traditional inspection. And that could be a realistic inspection flow. I based this on a 200 questionnaire for Con Edison in New York. And what they found was they'd go out and do their inspection with these 200 questions in a big book. Depending on the conditions, which substation they were at, how many transformers, who made the transformers, which ones were running and which weren't, they could complete this inspection successfully in 10 questions. So all they needed was that little bit, but they had to wade through everything to find it. So we want to get them to just do this. And with our what we call applicabilities, we're able to reach this point. So our inspections, we do inspections, checklists, surveys, all available offline. Mike and his team are taking these inspections out in the field, hundreds of work orders, hundreds of inspections, all offline. The dynamic piece we talked about, it's tied to Maximo where needed. Mike and his crew, heavily integrated with Maximo. They're pulling in asset specification attributes directly into the form so that the operator doesn't have to fill it in. If DataSplice can find the information and verify it, it will fill it in for you. Another customer is doing shift change checklist without any integration with Maximo at all. No need to create new fields in Maximo. I did, actually we're doing the project now for an airport in the north, and they were creating everything in Maximo, and they went to one screen, something like a job safety analysis, and it was in Maximo, scrolling and scrolling with radio buttons and checkboxes all the way down to be able to do this. No need to in here. You can schedule your inspections using maybe the PM module, and you can track them through the same way, so we associate them to work orders. If an inspection form is on a work order, like a PM, you go to your PM, hit begin inspection, fill it in. When it's finished, DataSplice says, oh, you're done, saves it, and it creates an HTML report version of it, which that report URL is attached to the work order in doc-links. But we've just upgraded that a little bit further, and now we can take it a step further and convert that to a PDF and attach it. There's also the possibility to email that out at the same time. So the question for those on the line was about keeping a copy of the inspection and getting it back into Maximo on the work order. Once the information is saved in DataSplice, we can copy it to Maximo. That data is available for you to mine however you want to. There's no licensing implications from DataSplice to create your own reports, publish the information or just the results. Con Edison, they've got a dashboard that shows the status of inspections as they go through. Just pulling that information straight out of there. You only need a DataSplice license to view these from inside of DataSplice. If it's published elsewhere, it's not required. Everything in the forms is stored in the DataSplice database. If it needs to go somewhere else, like to Maximo or to other systems, it's a copy that goes to those. So there's one place that has everything, and then the other systems just have the little bits and pieces that they need. We have validation and alarms. If you enter a pressure reading that is just ridiculous, it will tell you so and say, try again, bozo. If you put a reading in that could be real, but there's a problem, too high, too low, it can pop up an alarm, record your messages, and even from there go out and create a work order directly. The conditions for those can be just about anything you want. We have some simple ones. You know, if it's this, do this. If it's not this, do this. But then we can create expressions and calculations and even conceivably look up to another system completely if you're live and do a validation. One of our pipeline customers asked us if we could, that there was a tolerance for some piece of equipment that could depend on the ambient pressure and temperature. So you couldn't put fixed numbers in there. So at the time the form was going to be generated, they wanted to do a lookup to another system that had that information, pull that in, become the reference, and then go ahead and do it. And you know, we declared that yes, we can do that. Then we didn't build it in the end. They didn't want that. I think they were just testing us. And there's a full audit history as well. Everything goes into the database. The form templates, once they go into production status, actually once you create them in draft, they're in the database. Nothing gets deleted unless you go in through the back end and sneakily delete it. Every reading that's taken comes with a date, timestamp, user ID. If you go back after a form's been completed and make a change, you have to go through a process. You hit revise reading, and it will say, okay, what are you changing? Why are you changing it? And then that gets stored along with the original values. We want to make sure that nobody can call us out on not being compliant. Offline validations, we've got a review process. I think Mike's team are using this extensively, the guys in the field. They do their inspection, they submit it. It goes to a dashboard in DataSplice for somebody else to look at before it goes to the next stage, or it gets sent back for rework. It's a web-based tool, and most of the people that I train to do these forms are not IT developers by any means. It's often the business. It's the planners and schedulers. It's the business owners because it's easy. Brand new, we have the ability to export and import. Throughout the DataSplice application now, you can download data sets similar to in Maximo. Your list of work orders, whatever view you're in, you can download to CSV, create a report for somebody, and share that information, excuse me. Form side, we also have the ability to download an inspection, a complete inspection template in JSON format, and then copy it and upload it to another system. So we've improved the migration process. You want to develop your form in dev, have someone look at it in test, then move it to production. It used to be a database, back-end, messy process. It's front-end now. You download the file, import it, and move it on. In between, you can make changes as well. So you can go in the code. That would take some development experience because you're adjusting JSON. But I did it myself to test it, and it works. I can show you some of that. Version control, you create your first form, you publish it, version 1, and then you realize there's a spelling mistake or you missed a reading. You create a draft, modify it, publish it. It retires the first one. The new one comes in as version 2, and it tells the world it's version 2. And when you complete a form and save it in the database, it saves in the version it was in when it was generated. So if I then change the whole form, it's not going to go back and change that one. It's a snapshot in time at the point it was taken. Another question? So can we see previous versions of form templates was the question, and the answer is yes. I'll show you that. On-screen signature came in on our forms product. It's now available throughout the whole application on work orders and tickets and anywhere you want to. I've mentioned integration with multiple systems, scheduling, reporting. We can read and write to any of those objects in Maximo, including the last one. If you've got rights in Maximo to write to something, then the form can write to it, and it can also read from it. And you can use it as a change mechanism as well. So it might pre-populate with some asset specification attributes, and you say, oh, these are wrong. You change it in the form and upload it, and it can either, if you have the right, go directly to Maximo, or Data Splice can intercept those changes and present them for review in another application. So there's the old way of carrying all the forms around. You see these people all the time. I couldn't get a picture of one that was bulging with forms. I grabbed that one. So in the next slide is the Data Splice equivalent of that. So there's my assigned inspections. That's my clip box with my blank forms that I can pull out and fill in anytime I want to. Here it is in a work order. So there's my list of work orders in Data Splice. And Data Splice has detected with that particular one that I've got selected that there is a form associated to it. If it didn't see that, that begin inspection and blank report button don't even show up, not even grayed out. They're just not there. So from my work order, I can now begin inspection, and then it will pop up the form. We'll see that shortly. And then here, Daniel's going to talk more about GIS, but we're also launching our inspection forms from GIS as well. We've got people doing transmission line inspections. They find a tower that they're going to fail the inspection on. They select it on the map, hit a button marked fail. The form pops up and says, why did it fail? Tell me why. Fill in the information. Do we want to create a follow-up work order? So it's all tied in through the map as well. So that's all I'm going to show on the presentation for now. I have 2 backup slides that I'll come back to. In fact, no, let's do those now so I don't have to come in. Let's go to the next one. This is new. We've added charting and graphing to Data Splice, and it's now also included in forms. So in this instance, on that reading, Bank 5 RMPD end, at the top there's a button that's appeared called Chart Reading. So if you hit that, it will give you the history of that particular meter, showing you any trending. That's available in core Data Splice. You just go to the meter history and show a chart. But we've also got it in the form now. So if you're about to enter a reading and you think, oh, I wonder what's going on with this, you can hit that and see the chart. And it's available offline. Everything is available offline. We just tell it in the offline query, if there's a form that has readings, go check it and see if there's a history, and bring that in, store it in the cache, and you can have it offline. And with our new version, we're changing from Web SQL to IndexedDB in the back end. So some of you may have experienced data limits, especially on iOS. That's gone away as well. So the only limitation now that you'll face is how patient your user can be waiting for all the information to come down. Yeah, Alex is asking if you can limit the amount of history that you bring down, and that applies to meter history, work order history, asset history, anything you want. We define the queries to be as much or as little as you need. And what we typically find with the big users, we go out in the project and they say, we want the entire Maximo database. And while you're there, bring in all your map features. And we say, okay, and we hit the sync button. And 2 days later, we'll come back and say, how's it going? Yeah, we don't need all of Maximo anymore. So we work throughout the project, gradually reducing the data set to be just what you need. But we can also make that dynamic. And I think it was Mike's team in particular, and the guys at Williams were the same. They didn't know which region they were necessarily working in, or it can change week to week. So when you log in, you say, okay, this is what I'm doing this week. Maybe your role changes. Maybe you're in this shop 1 week, this shop the other. So you can tell it at login, this is my world today, only give me this. And we dynamically change the SQL query based on that to limit the data that's synchronized. Similar, yeah, those who can't hear it, Daniel from Colonial was asking about synchronizing and downloading GIS. My Daniel will talk about that in particular. But if it's Esri data or Maximo data, so the GPS positions are probably in Maximo, lat and long on the work order object, on the location, that's part of the Maximo data sync, so that will come in. If they're feature layers through a web service in Esri, they will come in as well, because we can synchronize with that. Where we have a limitation is on the aerial imagery, like the Google Earth type imagery, because we can't cache that. We can't hit those servers and cache it. It's public imagery. And even if you had your own, the data sets for that are so huge, we don't yet have the algorithm to say, okay, I only need this bit, just grab this bit. But what you can do, if you know you're going to need that offline, is while you're in the office, log in, go to that area with the mapping showing, scroll around, look at the areas you want to go, because DataSplice and the browser is caching that in the background through HTTP caching. It's a workaround, and the whole image set is on our roadmap to synchronize as well. But if your Esri data is well populated, like some of the slides and I think Daniel will show, you probably don't need all that anyway. So I'm logging in as a forms admin. Those of you who don't recognize this login screen, this is our new version 5.2 that's in final testing right now. So some slight changes. The other thing that comes with this is you can customize this login screen. Change the color, add a lot more text. The login banner that you may be familiar with, you can now use HTML to format that. It's good for, especially for the government customers, to put all their warnings of death and destruction if you do something wrong. And at the bottom where we've got our logo and DataSplice, we don't like you to, but you can replace that with your own as well, so make it your own application. So logged in as a forms user, the three extra pieces at the top, inspections, administration, and configuration, are for forms. The first piece typically goes out to all users. Supervisors will see field complete review. Technicians will see the others probably. In fact, they might even see assigned and inspection history. Administration, that's where the magic happens, and I'll show you, a little bit about creating the forms. This is not meant to be a lesson, and I'll get the crook around my neck pulling me off when the time runs out. And then we've got the configuration section. So let me go into that clipboard box that I've got, and I've got a bunch of forms here that are assigned to me. And I'm going to start with a job safety analysis. So I just select it, hit begin inspection with my job safety analysis form, which is not very long form in this case. It knows the date and the time because it gets it from the device. And in this case, we've made it read-only because it doesn't want me to change it. It wants to record the time around the form. I can enter a work order number. This is a dumb form just pulled out of my clipboard. And then my location. In this case, I don't want people to write down by Arby's. I want them to look it up and find the specific location in Maximo, so I can do a lookup. And again, that works offline. And then I've got one more question, really, or two. First thing I've got to do is tell it which hazards I'm going to face. So I'm going to say, well, I'm going to be hearing hazards because it's machinery. And as soon as I did that, it's generated the questions that I have to ask, and then go down and say, okay, I acknowledge that. I'm wearing those. I got my shoes. I got my hat, got my gloves, and my hearing protection. And then I can sign it to say that I did that. And DataSplice says, good. You want to save it? And it goes off and saves it in the DataSplice database. Question, Alan. Alan's asking if we can link that to the asset in Maximo. And I did not request you to ask that question, just for clarification. So let me go to my assigned work orders. And here's a work order where I'm going to go out and do something. And you see the begin inspection has appeared. So I'm going to hit begin inspection. And right away at the top, there's a banner that's come in from the work order. It says, you've got a work order. Here's some information. That is definable by you, what information is in there. I think Plains, and certainly somebody else, they've even got the number of corrective maintenance work orders that are open for this location. So whatever you want, we can pull it in there. Not just from Maximo. it can come from somewhere else. And then if you notice, the work order number and the location have been populated. I don't have a field for asset in this form, but it is on the one at the top. Now what's important there is, it's looked at that, actually it's looked at the asset and said, the asset has, in the hazards module of Maximo, a warning about heat. And it's put it in there and generated the questions for heat automatically. So we're tying it into the hazards on the safety plan, on the work order that's tied to that location in this example. But then when I get there, I'm a very cautious person, and I also want to say, well, I'm worried about my hearing as well. So I'm going to add the hearing protection to that to say that I've done that. Maybe there's a directive that's come out that says, okay, every one of these you do hearing protection as well, but it's not yet been updated in Maximo. So we can lock down fields, we can pre-populate fields, and we can leave them editable if you want to make changes or additions. And then I also have here, I created this as an upload, not a photograph, because on the other machine I wasn't sure if there's a camera. So let me just pick a picture from Kat's photo roll. And so I'm going to, let's say I've just taken this with my camera. What I can also do now is mark it up and say this is where the problem is, right here. And then save that. And that gets attached and goes up in the form. So that is one place where you can put the photo that does show in the reading. And I'll show you another one where there's a link to the photo that's stored offline you can go and look at. So some people in the room will recognize this. This is a permit safety checklist. There's a bunch of information. Once I've read that, I can shrink it. One question on the entire form. Well, that can't be right. So I'm going to say, well, I'm going to do work authorization on this one, but not the other two. So now those get generated. And here we have that example. So this is in blue, this DWP form here. That could be a photo. In this case, it's a PDF. So I can open that up, look at it, okay, close it, and then go back to my question. The problem with embedding it in the reading is the form gets that much bigger and unwieldy, so it's better to have a little link, and that's offline that works. So that's there. How many companies are represented? And then it opens it up again. I think this is the active field. So as you ask your questions, first of all, it can open up sections, so it's not such a big form to start with. Secondly, it can take you down a different set of questions completely in that flowchart example. When I do forms training, when we start looking at complex forms, I will often draw flowcharts up, and so that people can follow, because it's very easy to get lost in these. So that's generating the form. The inspection alarms we talked about. If I come in here, this is the alarms dashboard, and here's one that was created. And let me see if I can go and see the original inspection. So here we go, the first one and the second one generated alarms. I know that because there's an orange banner on the side. So behind here is some code that probably said the DV volts needed to be something else and it was out of range. Is the room clean? No. And here's an example of a checklist. The DV volts probably got a meter in Maximo, write it there. There's nowhere to write the answer to is the room clean in Maximo, so we keep it out. We've got the history. So the inspection history is where, excuse me, you can go back and look at the forms that have been generated and someone's filled them in, even if they've only partially completed them. So you see this one here is in progress. Remember what I said about version numbering? This is number 8. But now the button's changed to continue inspection. So maybe I took a break. Maybe I take 2 days to fill in a form. Maybe I fill in the first section and save it, and somebody else will then pick it up and continue it and do the rest. And you can see some of these have already been filled in. We can do different text field types. We can add information to the questions, highlight them, There's your camera option. This one's pretty cool. That one's pre-populated for some reason. But you can do math. So if I was to put 26 in here, it's going to recalculate, and it's going to add all these gallons readings, put an answer in here that's converted to barrels. Just about any equation you can do in Excel, you can put in here. Temperature conversion is a typical one. Gauges in Celsius, which makes sense to me, but not necessarily to everybody else. So you can enter what it says on the gauge, but report what you want it to. We have a reports tool, so I can go and look at that HTML report. This is just the basic one that comes with it. During the project, we can help define this, refine it, add your logos, do the layout. So this is what gets attached to the work order, either as a PDF or as the HTML direct report that you can access from anywhere within your network. Any questions on that so far? Tim's asking whether you can use groups instead of people for the inspected by field. Somebody has control of the device and the form. They're the user that's logged in. What you can do is we can have a field in there that says, Tim is in the work maintenance group, and always populate that with a group. We could start the form and say, okay, I've got the device and the login, but Alan's with me today, put him in, and it can record him as well. But because there's only one user on the device, the attribution, the little date timestamps will always be to that user, but you can tell it whoever else is with you. And we do the same with labor reporting now as well. You go out at the beginning of the day, you log in, it can ask you, who are you working with today? Alan's with me today, and we're using this truck. And then from then on, every work order gets the labor or the asset time for that until you tell it to do something else. But every single reading that you take records the name of the user that was doing it. We can use that to do your accountability. But what we also have, when you generate a form, we can tie it into the labor reporting, which would then have those different people. And I think we did this for Mike and his team at Plains. They've got child work orders that are embedded in the forms, and it may be that different people do those different sections. So you save it, somebody else comes in, and then you actually tell it in the form, okay, I'm doing this section, and it will go back and create the entry for you. A labor entry, whatever entry you want associated with that person. Because of the high configurability of Data Splice, I don't think there'll be a use case that you could throw at us that we couldn't configure. When it comes to an audit and accountability, the person who's logged into the device is the one who is accountable for everything. You can't, and all you can do then is assume that if that person says, these 3 people are with me, or automatically this group is part of it, there's no true accountability that they were there because you could have just said so. So let's have a quick look at the editing side. This is where we create our forms, the templates. Let me go to the job safety analysis. Let me just pick this. No, this one's draft, so I'll just open up this one. I open up the readings. This is how it looks when you're creating a form. The first ones are really easy. The point is just the grouping between those blue bars. I've only got one in here. We give it a numerical index, which is purely just for ordering within the list to put it in the right order. And I typically encourage, same with Maximo tasks, put some factor in there, because you can guarantee if you number 1 to 200 that you're going to have to go back in and put question 2 in somewhere else. So this keeps it easy. The key is unique. This is one of Stephen's forms. He uses this method. It can be whatever you like. I would make this the key as date. Make it something meaningful, because that key is what you're going to say in this little snippet of code here. If this key says this, in this case it's PT15, and over on the side here, you can see I've created a list, and this is going to say, if you pick machinery in amongst all the other answers, then show this one, which is safety glasses. So that's what's driving that. That little bit of code there, for non-technical folks, can look a bit off-putting and you're reaching out for the Alex of the world to come and write it for you, but we have a list of these and with a real-world description. I want to do this. You pick it, and then all you have to do is change that PT15 for the key that you're using, and then where it says machinery, change the value. And at the day 1 of the training class, that can seem a bit daunting. Day 2, people don't care. Day 3 of the class, when we wrap up and we're creating lots of forms, they're just laughing, wondering why it was so hard. It's not just a simple if this, then that. You can write and or statements in there. This one might have it. Oh, no, this is a different one, but here's something in there. Yeah, so here's a slightly longer one. For an airport runway inspection compliance form we did recently, we filled this box just to write a thing on the bottom of the screen to say whether it's compliant or not. Different reading types. So by selecting one of these, it tells the form what to expect. So the text one is just that small text box. Long text is the expanded one. And then you can tell it, always deliver an integer, 2 decimal places, combination of date and time, or just date, just time. And then there's the 3 binary ones at the bottom. Unit of measure is just a simple, you type it in. So it's not tied to Maximo unit of measure or anything like that, but it does help. You can define whether it's required here, in which case data supplies won't complete the form until you've answered the question. And if it's optional, it allows you to skip over it. And then we have the pick lists. And you saw we had maybe a drop-down. This is all you need to do to create a drop-down list. Just type it in here. And we can save these so you can just pull them in instead of typing them every time. Separate the entries by semicolons. And voila, you have a drop-down. If you surround that list with parentheses, they become radio buttons automatically. And then if you, I don't know, there's one in here, but if I was to surround that by curly brace, it's now a multi-select list. Just as simple as that. And then we can do predefined. So in this one, if I do location lookup and save that, that creates that link to a domain list. In the Data Splice admin client, I've said, if they say location lookup, go look at the locations table in Maximo. And if this is on the form, download it for offline use as well. And we've got lookups for assets, for people. I think there's inventory. And then the default value, I could just type in here. If it's most of the time it's going to be black, I can type that in there. But we can also do lookups as well. So this one is going to go, it's going to say you're logged in, here's your username. But then it says my username might be my employee ID, so 8212321G. So it's going to go to Maximo and do a crossover to the people table and actually pull your real name down so that people don't have to remember everybody's employee IDs or whatever the login name is. So those are some of the basic things. I know some of you in here have seen this and you've deployed it. So let's have a look at some of the new pieces we have. Those of you that have sat and created lots of forms, Targa for instance, we now have the ability to copy a reading. So if I want to do this same one again, maybe make a minor change, I can copy it and paste it. We can copy and paste alarms. We can clone applicability. So again, you're not constantly doing that. And I think, Alec, you'll appreciate some of these features. Common, so we can go create, there's some of the examples of radio buttons and so on that have been created, or lookups, is your export inspection. So it's going to take that whole inspection and download it to JSON. And then if I go to my other system and hit import, I can choose my file and import it, and it creates it in the new system. And then on this side, I've got my export data, which will take that entire result set, and I can even add any children that I want to add and export this to CSV. What I'd like to see on the forms creation side is the ability to export a form to CSV, make the changes in Excel, and then upload it again because it'll make it easier. But we're not there yet. We can do the JSON piece. So before I go any further, Targa in particular, because you're using forms, you've seen them. Does anybody else, any questions about anything in the forms that you've seen? It's not meant to be a lesson, so don't worry about remembering all of this. We can do that separately. Any questions, any observations, anything you'd want to see in product? And one thing I didn't show you on there, I've got the copy of the reading. We have the copy point as well, which is a grouping of readings, and it will take that entire group and copy it. And then one by one, you just go through, change the little bits that need to, like the key, and then save it, and then you've got a whole new group of questions. Well, if there's no more questions, we'll have a short break. I think it's Alec up next. Give him a few minutes to finish. I can answer questions about this all day long, so reach out to me if you have anything else. If you want to get some of these new features in there. I think some of them may need the new version of Data Splice, but I think most of it is configuration, so we should be able to. But you don't know what number you're on, 5.1 something. I think 5.1.155 was the last of the 5.1s, and we're now on 5.2. When you add an attachment inside the form, like you saw me upload that picture, that normally gets saved in Data Splice only, available through the form. But thanks to Plains All-American, where they want everything on the work order, we've now written it so that that can also go to the originating work order as well. The ability to go back and revise a reading with that audit trail was built for them. We've got another one where you might have a required field in the form and you just can't do it for some reason. Maybe you've got to check something and a tree's fallen down, you can't get to it. It allows you to bypass that reading, and then it pops up and says, well, why? And you say, well, look, tree, picture, and save it, and it allows you to complete the form, the inspection, and it goes back in with a rider saying, this was completed, but this question wasn't answered. And then the reviewer can decide whether to send somebody back to go and check on that or let it go through, depending on the form itself, the compliance, and things like that. Yes. Yeah, it's not all or nothing. So the question was basically how we can have launch the forms tied to work orders ad hoc. It can be either or both. So typically if it's on the work order, it's because the inspection, the PM, for instance, is about gathering information. So we tie it in through the job plan in Maximo and just put the form on there or a pointer to it, and then it knows it's there. But you have those ad hoc forms, and one of the examples for that is some CM work orders may be that if you generate a certain work order, classification, whatever, you have to fill in a form. You know, you have to report to somebody that something has happened. In the water industry, they'll get somewhere and they'll say, well, there's a water main break. So you create the work order for that, and bang, you can attach the form to it, fill it in, and save it. Job safety analysis is another one we can pop up and say, okay, now do your JSA, instead of trying to create all that in Maximo. We're seeing both. So the question is whether or not the forms generally are used ad hoc, or whether when you do an ad hoc form, you create a work order for it to go on. Where it makes sense, whichever path it is. The ad hoc forms in that sort of assigned inspections clipboard thing, they're not used so often as the ones that are associated with work orders, because most of what people do is an inspection, part of a PM process, so it's tied in that way. But it's available. One of our customers, I say, is not tied to Maximo, so they use that assigned list all the time, and they've actually customized it to be, you know, a forms library, and depending on which group they're on, which shift they're on, which site, it displays different forms for them, which they're using for things like shift changeovers, meter readings. They'll go do their rounds. You know, Building 24 at Johnson Space Center would be a prime one. They go around and take hundreds of meter readings every hour, bring up the form, it records the time, the date, and it does it in the order that you're going to walk around, save it, writes to Maximo, reports back to whomever that you've done it. Thanks very much. We'll, for those on the line, we're going to take a short break while we change around, and the next session.